Emma Carter was already tied to the chair when Sophia Bellini raised the riding crop again. The leather struck across Emma's shoulder with a sharp crack, yet no one came through the door. Bianca Romano stood before her with the calm impatience of a woman who believed the outcome had already been decided. "Confess," she said. "Tell me where you put the memorandum and this ends." Emma's wrists burned where the rope had tightened against them, but she lifted her head. "I didn't take anything." Sophia shifted beside her, waiting for permission to strike again. Bianca barely looked at her when she gave it. "Then perhaps you need help remembering." Emma knew exactly what Bianca was counting on. A maid's word would carry little weight against the future wife of Luca Moretti, and everyone in the house had learned that challenging someone close to him could be dangerous. The crop rose, but before it could fall, a voice cut through the room. "Enough." Sophia froze. Bianca turned first. Luca Moretti stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Bianca recovered quickly. "Luca, she stole from you." His gaze moved from the crop in Sophia's hand to the rope around Emma's wrists, then back to Bianca. "Untie her." Bianca's mouth tightened. "You don't understand. I understand exactly what I'm looking at." He crossed the room, cut the rope himself, and stepped back when she pulled her hands free. She rubbed circulation into her fingers and stood carefully, refusing to lean on the chair. "What did she steal?" Luca asked. "The Bandy negotiation memorandum," Bianca answered. "The original file from your study. I found proof in her room." Emma looked at Luca. "Planted proof." Bianca laughed. Of course she would say that. Luca lifted one hand and silence returned. "Emma, did you take the memorandum? No. Did you enter my study during cleaning hours?" Bianca seized on the answer. You see, Luca ignored her. "Did you open the secure cabinet?" No. Then what was Bianca trying to make you confess to? Emma's eyes flicked toward Bianca. "I told you. I didn't steal from you. That wasn't my question." "I know." Luca studied her. Bianca stepped forward. "She is manipulating you. I was protecting your family." Luca turned to her. "By tying an employee to a chair, she refused to confess, and that gave you authority to hit her. I'm going to be your wife. Not tonight." Luca ordered Sophia out and told Bianca she would leave the house until he understood what had happened. "You're throwing me out because a maid refuses to answer you. I'm removing you because I came home and found you supervising an assault." Bianca's face hardened. "When you discover what she did, remember that I warned you." She left without another word. "I'm calling the doctor." "No." That wasn't a suggestion. Emma looked at him, and something in her expression stopped him. "That is exactly the problem." Luca frowned. "What is you think because you stopped them, everything after that becomes your decision." Emma continued. "They tied me to a chair here. Sophia hit me because Bianca believed she could force a confession before you returned. And people heard." Luca's expression changed. "What people?" "The staff outside. They heard me refuse. They heard Bianca threaten me. Nobody came in. They were afraid of her." Emma gave him a tired look. They were afraid of what she represented. Bianca was his fiancée. Everyone in the house had assumed that whatever authority she used came ultimately from him. Luca had spent years believing silence in the Moretti residence meant order. Emma stepped toward the door, then stopped. "You want to know why Bianca thought she could do this to me inside your home?" Luca looked at her. "Yes, so do I." Minutes later, Luca entered his study and opened the secure cabinet where the Bandy memorandum should have been. The folder was gone. He checked the access log. 3 authorized entries appeared that week: his own credentials, his chief administrator's, and Bianca Romano's. Emma's name was nowhere on the record. That did not prove innocence, but it made Bianca's certainty difficult to explain. Luca called his security director and ordered every access record for the floor, all cleaning schedules, and corridor footage from the previous 7 days. He also requested the evidence supposedly found in Emma's room. By midnight, the first reports arrived. Emma had entered the study twice, both times during scheduled cleaning and both times with another employee present. The cabinet had not been opened during either visit. The last recorded access had occurred on Tuesday evening under Bianca's credentials. Then the torn envelope from Emma's room was placed on his desk. It bore the same internal reference code as the missing memorandum, but something about it bothered him. After several minutes, he realized why. The code had been handwritten in an old format his office had stopped using 6 months earlier. Whoever created the evidence knew enough about Moretti files to imitate a confidential record, but not enough to know the filing system had changed. Luca requested the archived corridor footage. A still image arrived shortly afterward. Sophia Bellini stood outside the staff hallway with something concealed beneath her coat. 23 minutes later, another camera showed her leaving without it. Luca leaned back his attention, returning to Emma's refusal to explain what Bianca had been trying to silence. If Bianca truly believed Emma had stolen the memorandum, why had she been more interested in forcing a confession than recovering the document? Why had fear crossed her face when Emma refused to say what she knew? The pieces no longer fit the story Bianca had given him. Luca looked once more at the empty space inside the cabinet, then at Sophia's image on the screen. A darker possibility began to take shape. The theft may never have been the reason Emma was tied to that chair. It may only have been the excuse. By the following morning, Luca no longer treated Emma as a suspect, but he still did not understand why she had remained silent when speaking could have saved her sooner. He called her into the study and placed the falsified envelope beside the security image of Sophia in the staff corridor. "You didn't steal the memorandum," he said. Emma barely reacted. "You sound disappointed that it took this long." Luca ignored the remark. "Bianca manufactured evidence against you." Sophia planted it. "Who were you protecting?" Emma glanced at the door. "Your sister." Luca went still. "Isabella. She hasn't done anything intentionally. That is not the same as saying she did nothing." "Exactly. That's why I wouldn't accuse her before I knew more." Emma explained that several vendor payments connected to household purchases had been corrected recently. The invoices were legitimate when Isabella approved them, but the beneficiary information changed afterward. "You're saying Isabella signed fraudulent payments?" Luca asked. "No. She signed legitimate approvals. Someone altered the banking details later. Each discrepancy had been fixed before it reached Luca. "Why wasn't I told?" he asked. "Because people in this house solve problems before they reach you." "They should have told me." "Technically, yes. In reality, most people assume you don't want to hear from someone at our level unless something has already gone wrong." He had built a system where information moved upward through advisors he trusted, while small errors below were corrected and forgotten. Now those errors formed a pattern. Luca ordered the vendor files brought in, and Emma showed him details. His advisors had overlooked a supplier name spelled differently on 2 copies. A payment date shifted after approval, an account number replaced, and a request rerouted through an unrelated office. None proved conspiracy alone, but together they suggested deliberate interference. Luca pointed to one name. This administrator had access. Access isn't guilt. He benefited from the change. That makes him worth investigating. You always resist the obvious conclusion only when the evidence doesn't support it yet. Emma noticed what others missed but refused to say more than the facts allowed. The next breakthrough came from Sophia. Luca's security director discovered that she had visited the Moretti administrative offices 3 times during the previous month without legitimate reason. When Luca gave Emma the dates, she checked the invoices. All 3 visits happened within 24 hours of altered payment instructions. The timing was too precise to ignore. Sophia had not merely helped Bianca frame Emma, she appeared to be carrying information between people. Emma then found a witness authorization beneath one of Isabella's approvals. The signature belonged to Marco Duca. Luca recognized it instantly. Marco had served Luca's father for more than 20 years and known Isabella since childhood. The voice you heard Bianca speaking to Luca said, "You thought it was Marco. I thought it might be. His signature is here. On a document he was authorized to witness." Luca's frustration sharpened. "And Sophia visited his building before the payment changed. That gives us a reason to investigate him. It does not prove he changed the account. You're defending him. I'm defending the difference between evidence and anger." Instead of confronting Marco immediately, Luca ordered a quiet audit. While he investigated, Bianca changed tactics. She could no longer make Emma look like a thief, so she tried to make her look ridiculous. Rumors spread that Emma had exploited Luca's guilt, engineered private meetings to make herself indispensable, and imagined she could replace Bianca. Bianca emphasized that Emma was a plus-size maid, ordinary by the standards of women Luca could choose. Luca offered to make a public statement. I can make it clear that I respect you. Emma closed the inventory ledger. And then what Bianca wants this to become a competition between two women for your attention. If I defend myself by announcing that you respect me, I'm still accepting her version of the story. She met his eyes. She thinks calling me fat should embarrass me. It doesn't. She thinks being a maid should embarrass me. It doesn't. And she thinks the worst thing she can say is that a man like you would never want a woman like me. My dignity does not depend on proving that you could desire me. Emma refused a battlefield built from status beauty and male approval. The confrontation came the next evening at a family dinner hosted by Luca's aunt, Caterina. Bianca had demanded the meeting, claiming she could prove Emma stole the memorandum and manipulated Luca against his fiancé. Bianca, Sophia, Isabella, Marco, Caterina, and several senior associates were present. Luca placed the cabinet records before them. Emma never opened the secure compartment. Bianca answered. She could have found another way. Luca produced the lock report. There was no forced entry, no override, and no unexplained access. Then he displayed the torn envelope. The reference code was copied from a filing system my office stopped using 6 months ago. Finally, he placed the corridor image beside it. And this is Sophia entering the staff hallway the night the evidence appeared. Sophia's face drained of color. Bianca turned toward her. Don't. The word altered the room. Luca looked at Bianca. What exactly shouldn't she do? Sophia realized Bianca needed someone else to carry the blame. I didn't invent the theft, she said. Bianca snapped. Stop talking. Sophia ignored her. You told me the document story. You said we only needed something convincing enough to get Emma dismissed. Isabella stared at Bianca. Why? Sophia looked toward Emma. Because the document wasn't the real reason. Emma heard something. Luca's voice lowered. What? Bianca talking to someone about negotiations. Information you weren't supposed to know had been shared. Bianca laughed too quickly. Sophia turned on her. You told me never to ask his name. While everyone watched Bianca, Emma noticed Marco's hand beneath the table, his thumb working across his phone. Mr. Duca. Marco stopped. Emma looked at his hand. If this has nothing to Ponyotin, Ponyo deleting something. Luca held out his palm. Give me the phone. Marco placed it face down on the table. This is absurd. Then unlocking it should make the absurdity disappear. Marco's jaw tightened. I have served this family for decades, I know, Luca said. That is why I am asking instead of assuming. Marco glanced at Bianca for less than a second. Sophia saw it. That's him. Bianca's composure cracked. You said she never saw you. She realized too late that she had confirmed there was someone for Emma to see. Luca's attention shifted to Marco. Bianca gave me information, Marco admitted. But she understood what your marriage could provide: permanent access to decisions, schedules, people, and pressure points. Isabella's face hardened. And my approvals, Marco looked at her. You were useful. He explained that Isabella signed legitimate documents, after which payment details were altered through administrative channels linked to his office. The amounts were kept small and spread among existing vendors, so the transactions appeared routine. The accounts could later move larger sums, reward allies, and influence which businesses remained close to Luca. Bianca supplied negotiation schedules, priorities, and private information about people Luca trusted or distrusted. Marriage would have given her permanent access. Marco wanted the influence that access could buy. Isabella had never been a partner. She was an innocent authorization layer whose reputation could absorb suspicion if anyone noticed. Emma placed 3 invoice copies on the table. The original vendor details are intact when Isabella signs. Every alteration appears later, and each was processed through an administrative account associated with Marco's office. Bianca turned toward Marco. You told me those couldn't be traced. Sophia gave a disbelieving laugh. You were going to blame me. Don't be ridiculous. You already did. You told me to plant the envelope. You said once Emma confessed, she would be fired and nobody would care what she claimed afterward. Emma looked directly at Sophia. You still hit me. Sophia lowered her eyes. Yes. Sophia would give a complete statement, but her role in the assault and fabricated evidence remained part of the record. Marco lost every position connected to the family. His accounts were placed under audit, and transactions requiring legal action were referred for formal review. Luca answered betrayal by removing the access and authority that had protected Marco for years. Then he faced Bianca. She looked toward the engagement ring on the table. "You're choosing her over me," she said. Even now, she tried to force the story into a contest between two women. Luca refused. "This is not about choosing Emma. If she had never entered this room, the evidence would still show what you did. And what you did to her would still be wrong if I had never learned her name." He pushed the ring toward Bianca. "You will not become my wife." Bianca lost her guaranteed status. Sophia lost the protection she thought loyalty would buy, and Marco lost the trust that made his influence possible. Their conspiracy collapsed not under violence but under records, timestamps, testimony, and the observations of the woman they had assumed nobody important would believe. Emma had been nearly invisible inside the Moretti household, yet she had seen what powerful people ignored. By the end of the night, Luca understood that the person with the least formal authority in his world had exposed those with the most, without confusing suspicion with proof or revenge with justice. For most of his adult life, Luca Moretti had understood power as control. He protected people by making decisions before danger could reach them, maintained order by enforcing instructions, and trusted silence as proof that his system worked. If people remained quiet, he read that quiet as loyalty or respect. Emma forced him to reconsider every one of those assumptions. The first crack appeared the night he found her tied to a chair. He stopped Sophia, cut the rope, removed Bianca, and believed the crisis was manageable because he had taken command. Then Emma asked why nobody had come when she cried out. Several employees had heard, yet none intervened. Luca's explanation was simple: they had been afraid of Bianca. Emma corrected him. They were afraid of what Bianca represented. Bianca had no formal authority over the staff, but everyone believed she soon would. She was his fiancée, and in the Moretti house, proximity to Luca had become borrowed power. If Bianca acted with confidence, employees assumed he would support her. If she crossed a line, challenging her felt like challenging him. Luca had built a hierarchy to keep the house secure, but it had also taught people beneath him that survival often depended on silence. He had mistaken fear for order because fear was quiet. When Emma's injuries became visible, he told her he would call a doctor. She refused. He informed her that it was not a suggestion. Later, he offered her enough money to remove any need to work again. To Luca, both gestures felt protective. To Emma, they revealed the same habit. "You still think protecting me means deciding what is best for me." Luca had always believed benevolent control was different from domination. Emma made him see that stopping Bianca did not give him ownership of every decision that followed. Paying for Emma's future without asking what future she wanted would still place him at the center of her life. Good intentions could reduce harm, but they did not create consent. He began to understand that protection also required limits on himself. The same lesson changed how he viewed information. Problems moved upward through managers, advisors, administrators, and relatives until they reached him in a form he could act on. Emma exposed the weakness with one sentence: "You built a system where information moves upward through people you trust. That works until the people you trust become the problem." Marco Duca proved her point. Luca had spent years studying enemies who might betray him, yet paid less attention to how trusted people behaved toward those beneath them. He could recognize a threat across a negotiation table, but not always. The abuses hidden in routine, an altered invoice, a frightened employee, a complaint corrected before it reached him, a future wife whose influence grew because nobody knew where her authority ended. Emma saw those details because she lived where the consequences appeared first. Luca realized that authority distorted the information reaching the person at the top. People told powerful men what was safe to say, not always what was true. His response had to be structural, not emotional. He introduced rules that no family member, guest, or romantic partner could privately discipline an employee. Complaints could bypass supervisors and reach an independent administrator. No future title, including that of Luca's wife, would automatically grant authority over staff. Financial approvals would be checked against original vendor records, and changes after authorization would create an audit trail. Employees were told that reporting misconduct would not be treated as disloyalty. Luca did not announce these measures to Emma as if seeking praise. He issued them because the previous system had failed. Change embedded into procedure was harder to reverse. His methods of investigation shifted as well. Before Emma, Luca's instinctive sequence was simple: identify a suspect, confront the suspect, force an answer, punish betrayal. It was fast and dangerously dependent on his certainty. Emma interrupted that pattern. When Marco's signature appeared on a questionable invoice, Luca wanted to confront him at once. Emma refused to call the signature proof. Access is not guilt, she reminded him. When Sophia's visits aligned with altered payments, Emma agreed the pattern justified investigation but would not claim it proved who changed the accounts. Luca found her caution frustrating until he recognized what it protected him from: believing power made suspicion sufficient. So he ordered a quiet audit instead of a violent confrontation. Records were compared, timestamps, reconstructed accounts traced, and statements separated from assumptions. By the time Marco was exposed, Luca did not need fear to produce the truth. The evidence had narrowed the possibilities. Even after Marco admitted betrayal, Luca chose accountability over spectacle. Marco lost access, position, influence, and the protection of his reputation. Transactions requiring legal review were documented. Sophia's cooperation did not erase her responsibility for assaulting Emma. Bianca's engagement ended because the evidence showed what she had done, not because Luca needed revenge. For a man raised in a world where strength was measured by how quickly consequences could be inflicted, restraint became a harder form of authority. Emma did not make Luca gentle overnight, or erase the instincts that had kept him alive. What she changed was the question he asked before using them. He began to distinguish between having the power to act and having the right to decide for someone else. He learned that silence could conceal fear, loyalty could conceal corruption, protection could become control, and certainty could become injustice when it outran evidence. Most importantly, he stopped treating good intentions as proof that his decisions were good for everyone around him. The change was gradual because it required more than regretting Bianca's cruelty. Luca had to admit that the conditions allowing her cruelty had developed under his authority. He had not tied Emma to the chair, but he had built a household where Bianca believed she could. He had not ordered the staff to remain outside, but his reputation had taught them that intervention might be dangerous. Accepting that distinction allowed him to take responsibility without controlling the repair. By the time the conspiracy ended, Luca still possessed the same wealth, influence, and capacity for force. What changed was his understanding of when not to use them. Power no longer meant making every decision. Sometimes it meant creating rules that limited even the people closest to him. Sometimes it meant listening to an employee who contradicted him. Sometimes it meant allowing an investigation to move slowly because evidence mattered more than anger. And sometimes it meant protecting another person's freedom even when that freedom gave them the right to walk away. After Bianca and Marco were exposed, Luca expected the Moretti house to become safe again. To him, that meant she could stay without fear. Emma saw it differently. When she gave 2 weeks' notice, Luca stared at her as if she had announced something impossible. "The danger is over," he said. "I know. Bianca is gone. Marco is gone. The household has changed. I know that too." His frustration sharpened. "Then why leave?" Emma met his eyes. "Because I have changed too." She was not leaving because she hated Luca or the house. The investigation had forced her to recognize how much of her life had been spent making herself useful inside other people's systems. Returning to the same role because it was familiar felt like choosing invisibility after finally realizing she did not have to remain there. Luca's first instinct was to solve the problem for her. He placed an envelope on his desk and said it contained enough money to remove any financial pressure while she decided what came next. Emma did not touch it. "No." Luca frowned. "It isn't charity." "Then what is it, security?" Emma pushed the envelope back. "You still think protecting me means deciding what my future should look like?" Emma shook her head. Money from him would make one option easier than the others, and that would still shape her choice around his power. She wanted the right to choose for herself, to fail if necessary, and to succeed without wondering whether success had been purchased for her. Luca finally understood that removing obstacles was not always the same as respecting freedom. 3 days later, he asked Emma to meet him in the conference room. A single folder rested on the table. "Another version of the envelope?" she asked. "No money." "What did you decide for me this time?" "Nothing." Inside was a job description for a compliance firm expanding its internal investigations team, a contact name, application instructions, and a deadline. Nothing had been completed for her. No interview had been arranged. Emma slowly looked up. You recommended me, no. Luca explained that he had only asked whether the firm would consider someone without conventional investigative experience if she could pass the same assessment as everyone else. They had said yes. You could have called them and gotten me the job. Yes. But you didn't. No. Why? Luca answered without hesitation. Because then it would still belong partly to me. For once he had opened a door without deciding whether she would walk through it. Emma thanked him, took the folder, and applied on her own. The assessment was harder than she expected. She finished certain she had made mistakes. She passed. The interview was no easier. Emma had to explain why years of domestic work had prepared her for investigative analysis without pretending her experience was something it had not been. She spoke about delivery records, duplicate invoices, mismatched names, patterns in routine paperwork, and the discipline of withholding conclusions until evidence was complete. 3 weeks after leaving the Moretti house, she accepted a junior investigations analyst position. The new job did not turn her into an expert overnight. She had to learn compliance software reporting standards, interview protocols, and unfamiliar terminology. She asked questions that sometimes felt embarrassingly basic. She once misclassified a transaction and had to correct her own report. Another time, she followed a discrepancy for hours before discovering it was an ordinary data entry error. Yet those mistakes mattered because they were hers. Nobody rushed in to protect her from them, and nobody treated them as proof that she did not belong. When she found inconsistencies, people asked what she saw instead of quietly fixing the problem before someone important arrived. For the first time, noticing things was not an inconvenience. It was her job. As a maid, Emma had often been present without being included, useful without being consulted. As an analyst, observation itself had value. She was building a professional life in a place where Luca's name carried no responsibility for her success. Luca stayed away. He did not call, send flowers, give gifts, or use Isabella to carry messages. He did not appear at Emma's office under the excuse of business or invent a reason for her to return to the house. As the weeks passed, she understood that restraint was harder for Luca than action. He could investigate threats, remove disloyal advisors, change rules, and use influence to solve problems. He could not order Emma to trust him. Giving her space meant accepting that she might build a life in which he had no place at all. Respecting her freedom required accepting the possibility that she might never return. 2 months passed before she saw him again. One Thursday evening, Emma left work and found Luca waiting across the street. He had come alone. There was no driver beside him, no security detail, no flowers, and no manufactured emergency. Emma crossed her arms. Are you investigating me now? Luca almost smiled. I was told arriving with flowers might be excessive. Who told you, Isabella? She's improving your judgment. Apparently everyone is. Emma laughed softly. Luca did not move closer until he asked, May I walk with you? The question mattered because months earlier he would simply have decided that walking beside her was harmless and therefore required no permission. Emma nodded and they started down the street. You never called, she said. You wanted control over your future. I did. I assumed that included control over whether I remained in it. Emma glanced at him. That must have been difficult. Extremely. She smiled. After a few blocks, Luca stopped. He told her that what he had felt when he found her tied to the chair had been anger, responsibility, and guilt, not love. Respect had come first, then trust, then the realization that he wanted her in his life after she no longer needed anything from him. Emma listened. What exactly are you asking, dinner? She raised an eyebrow. That was a long speech for dinner. I had 2 months to prepare, and if I say no, you go home. Nothing changes, no consequences. That answer mattered more than the speech. Emma could refuse him without losing employment, money, protection, status, or safety. Luca no longer controlled the conditions surrounding her choice. She had a career that was hers, an income that did not depend on him, and a future that would continue whether he entered it or not. For the first time, they stood before each other without employer and employee, rescuer and victim, benefactor and dependent defining the space between them. Luca was asking rather than arranging, and Emma was choosing rather than accepting what power placed in front of her. She looked at him for a long moment. Dinner, she said. Luca smiled. Her yes meant something precisely because she had been completely free to say no. Months later, when Emma returned to the Moretti house, she didn't enter through the staff corridor. Once, she had belonged to the machinery of the house, moving through rooms because her work required her to be there. Now Luca had invited her as a guest, and she had accepted because she wanted to come. Mrs. Alvarez was the first to see her and wrapped her in an embrace before Emma could protest. Isabella appeared moments later with a folder beneath one arm and immediately demanded Emma's opinion about a business proposal. Across the room, Luca watched without interrupting. He did not answer for her or redirect the conversation. He simply let her speak. Emma noticed because months earlier Luca had filled silence with decisions, believing that protecting someone meant taking responsibility for what happened next. Now he understood that respect sometimes required leaving space untouched. Emma had changed as well. Her work at the investigations firm had given her a life built from choices she made for herself. She had passed the assessment without Luca's influence, survived interviews without his name opening the door, learned unfamiliar systems and corrected mistakes on her own. None of it had transformed her into a different person. It had simply given a visible place to abilities that had always existed. The woman reading Isabella's proposal was the same woman who once noticed mismatched invoices while carrying out domestic duties. The difference was that now people expected her to notice. Returning to the Moretti house mattered because Emma was not returning because Luca had rescued her, because his money made her secure, or because being loved by a powerful man had elevated her status. She came back only after proving to herself that she could leave. Luca's feelings did not create her value. Emma had possessed that value when she was still a maid, when Bianca called her disposable, when Sophia raised the riding crop, and when employees stood outside the door too frightened to intervene. She had possessed it before Luca understood her intelligence, before Isabella knew she had been protected, and before anyone around the Moretti family considered her judgment worth hearing. Her dignity hadn't appeared when Luca began to admire her. His growth only allowed him to recognize what had been present from the beginning. Bianca had believed the opposite. To her, power meant permission to control those beneath her. Status gave her the right to humiliate, punish, and determine whose voice deserved credibility. Her engagement to Luca was not simply a relationship. It was a promise of authority she expected others to obey. When Emma threatened that authority, Bianca tried to force a confession, destroy her reputation, and reduce her to a woman competing for male approval. Emma defeated that strategy by refusing its premise. She never needed to prove she was prettier than Bianca, more desirable, or more worthy of Luca's attention. She needed only to insist that no person's dignity should depend on those judgments. Luca's original understanding of power had been less cruel, but it contained another danger. He believed strength meant making the correct decisions for people he cared about. He could remove threats, provide money, create security, and solve problems, so he assumed using those abilities was automatically protective. Emma taught him that even generous control remained control when the other person had no meaningful choice. Power could be responsible only when it accepted limits, listened to evidence, and allowed another person to refuse what was offered. Emma represented a third idea. For her, power began with ownership of oneself, the right to judge evidence before making accusations, keep dignity when others assigned shame, and choose a future without owing it to someone stronger. She protected Isabella because truth mattered more than convenience. She stopped Luca from condemning Marco before the evidence was complete because anger was not proof. She walked away from money because security purchased at the cost of independence was not the life she wanted. And when Luca finally asked for a place in that life, she could say yes because no punishment waited behind a no. That freedom gave their relationship meaning. Emma's victory was never that a mafia boss fell in love with a plus-size maid. It was that the woman everyone expected to remain invisible refused to surrender judgment, dignity, or choice, even when doing so would have made her life easier. Luca's love did not create her worth. It became worthy of her only after he learned to respect what was already there. Bianca had used power to make people smaller. Luca had once used it to decide for those he wanted to protect. Emma showed them both what they had missed. Real power is revealed not only by what a person can force, but by what they refuse to take from someone else. And love matters only when the person beside you remains free enough to walk away.